You spent $400, maybe $800, on a suspension kit with heavy duty on the box. 18 months later, your truck sits 2 inches lower than the lift you paid for. Your tires are wearing from the inside out, and the brand's FAQ explains that some settling is normal. Some settling is normal. That phrase is a confession. Settling is only normal when the spring was never built to its rated specification to begin with. Here is the thing. Load ratings in the suspension aftermarket are largely self-certified. There is no federal mandate requiring third-party verification before a brand can stamp HD or heavy duty on a spring or strut. SAEJ 1698 is the engineering standard that defines how spring rate, load capacity, and fatigue life should be measured. Compliance is voluntary. Brands that meet it say so on the spec sheet. Brands that do not write a bigger number on the box and move on. The gap between what the box says and what the spring does is not bad luck. It is the business model. We are going through 8 brands that have built careers on ratings their products cannot hit, with the forensic data to prove every single one. Stop shopping like a victim and start thinking like an auditor. Subscribe before we get into it. This list is going to save you from a mistake that costs 2 to 4 times what the kit itself costs to fix. And stay until the end, because the last thing I cover is the one brand that actually publishes independent test data and the 4-step protocol for making sure you are never on the wrong side of a self-certified load rating again. Item 1. Rough Country. The load rating that lives only in marketing. Brand 1. Rough Country is the highest volume suspension brand in this category, which means more buyers are exposed to this failure mode than any other on this list. The failure mode is spring sag and coil over seal failure, not from abuse, not from overloading, from normal use within the stated application range. Spring rate is the number that determines how much your suspension compresses under a given load. A spring rated at 600 pounds per inch should compress 1 inch under 600 pounds of force. That is the specification. That is what heavy duty is supposed to guarantee. Rough country coilovers do not hit that number. Independent dyno tests on new units before a single mile have measured spring rates 15 to 22% below the advertised specification. The SAG at 18 months was not produced by 18 months of driving. It was manufactured in. Rough Country's business model is volume, selling at 30 to 50% below established competitors. To hit those price points, something gives. What gives is in the metallurgy, a lower-grade spring steel alloy at a wall thickness that supports the price, not the rating. The exact alloy is not disclosed in their product documentation. That omission is a decision. The marketing team set the load rating. The engineers found out at the warranty claim. A 2022 independent dyno evaluation tested a Rough Country 2.0 Performance Series coilover advertised at 600 pounds per inch, measured spring rate 487 pounds per inch, 18% below spec on a brand new unit. The same test found oil bypass in the damper at 72 degrees Fahrenheit, not a hot desert day, a mild summer afternoon on the highway with a trailer. NHTSA 340-plus complaints across 2019 through 2024. Most common, vehicle pulling and ride height loss. Translation: the spring was never manufactured to its rating. The SAG is not the product failing in service. It is the product performing exactly as it was built to perform. That is the problem. Hiring a moving company that quoted you a 10-ton truck and showed up with a 5-ton van. The job gets done, not the way you were told it would. Brand 1 is a volume play. Brand 2 is something different and arguably worse, a brand with genuine 40-year history that has been hollowed out by its current owners. Item 2, Superlift, 40 years of brand equity on top of budget components. Brand 2, Superlift, founded in 1975. And here is the thing, the history is real. The early Superlift engineering earned that reputation. The problem is that you are not buying the 1975 company. You're buying what it became after it was acquired, consolidated, and repriced. The failure mode is bushing disintegration and spring plate cracking. Superlift's leaf spring add-a-leaf kits use polyurethane bushings with durometer ratings in the 70A to 75A range. Properly specified heavy-duty bushings should run 90A or higher. Durometer is the hardness scale. The higher the number, the more load the material handles before it permanently deforms. At 70A, under repeated load cycling, the bushing squashes. The interface wears. The driver feels wander. The alignment shop sees caster settings it cannot hold. Superlift is owned by Transamerican Auto Parts, which also owns ProComp. Both brands share engineering and manufacturing resources while appearing at retail as independent competitors. If you cross-shopped both and chose the one with better reviews, there is a credible possibility you bought the same product with a different label. A class action lawsuit filed in 2021 in the Central District of California named Superlift products in claims of misrepresented load capacity. The complaint cited documented SAG of 1.5 to 3 inches within 24 months on vehicles within the stated compatibility range. Superlift settled without admission of wrongdoing, which is exactly what a company does when the evidence is credible and the litigation cost exceeds the settlement cost. NHTSA, 190 plus entries. Bushing failure and spring plate cracking in 60% of filings. Translation: the 40-year reputation on the box is real. The suspension inside is not what that reputation was built on. You are paying for a legacy the current owners are monetizing without maintaining. The family restaurant that sold to private equity, same sign. Different supplier in the kitchen. Brand 2 coasts on inherited credibility. Brand 3 takes it further. A product sold as a distinct competitor to the brand it is secretly identical to. Item 3. ProComp, when the competitor is the same product. Brand 3. ProComp. ProComp and Superlift are owned by the same parent company, Trans-American Auto Parts. They share engineering resources and manufacturing infrastructure. At similar price points, the two brands have been found to share identical internal components under different branding. The distinction you are making at the parts counter may not exist in the warehouse. The failure mode is coilover collapse and damper fade. ProComp's ES9000 series spring rates consistently measure 10 to 18% below stated specifications. But the damper failure is the one with a safety consequence. Damper valving controls how fast the suspension compresses and rebounds. When that valving fades under sustained heat, the shock stops providing meaningful resistance on the rebound stroke. You hit a bump, the suspension compresses and bounces back at whatever rate the spring dictates, uncontrolled. A suspension without rebound damping is not a suspension system. It is a pogo stick managing your truck's contact patch at highway speed. SAEJ 1698. Testing by an independent engineering firm published in 2023 found ProComp coilover spring rates averaging 14% below stated specification across 6 SKUs. Damper fade testing, 500 compression cycles at operating temperature, showed bypass valve failure in 4 of 6 units. 4 out of 6 is not an outlier, that is a pattern. NHTSA, 220 plus entries. Top descriptors: loss of vehicle control and abnormal tire wear. Those are not comfort complaints, those are safety events. Translation: the spring never reached its rating. The damper fades under towing heat. The truck is not the problem. The suspension was built to behave exactly this way. A ProComp coilover is a garden hose marketed as a fire hose. It moves the water, not at the pressure you needed. If this is already opening your eyes, hit the like button. It helps this channel reach buyers before they make the purchase, not after. Keep watching. 3 brands, 3 versions of the same failure. Brand 4 is different. Not systematic under-engineering, but inconsistent engineering. In some ways, harder to protect yourself against. Item 4. Skyjacker, the tempering problem. Nobody talks about Brand 4, Skyjacker. Founded in 1974, headquartered in Plain Dealing, Louisiana. And here is the thing. Skyjacker's failure is not the same as the first 3. The problem is not that their springs are systematically under spec. It is that they are inconsistently manufactured, meaning 2 trucks with the same kit can perform differently from each other. A failure mode you cannot predict or diagnose without pulling and testing the components. The technical failure is inconsistent tempering. Tempering is the heat treatment that gives spring steel its load-bearing properties and fatigue resistance. Consistent tempering produces matched spring rates. Inconsistent tempering produces a box of springs that are visually identical and mechanically different. When the 2 springs in your kit have different spring rates, one corner of your truck carries more load than the other. The driver's side sits lower. You did the install correctly. The problem is that the springs in the box were not the same spring, they are spring-shaped objects from the same lot, held together by hope and self-tapping screws in a quality control process that never caught the variance before the box was sealed. Skyjacker sources spring steel from overseas suppliers, including manufacturers in Southeast Asia, where quality control documentation is frequently unavailable to the end buyer. No published supplier audit trail means no mechanism to verify that the material in your spring matches the spec on the box. Independent metallurgical testing of Skyjacker economy leaf springs in 2022 found Rockwell hardness varying by 8 to 12 HRC points across units from a single production lot. Properly tempered spring steel should hold variation within 3 HRC points. At 8 to 12 points of variance, you do not have matched springs. NHTSA 150 plus entries. Most common uneven ride height, premature leaf pack separation. Translation, you did not get a matched pair. The variance is structural, baked into the supply chain before your kit was assembled. You had no way to know. 2 supposedly identical bolts, where one is half the tensile strength. The difference is invisible until the load arrives. Brand 4's failure is manufacturing. Brand 5's failure is engineering. A product that solves the problem you can see and creates a more expensive one you cannot. Item 5. ReadyLift, the $200 kit with the $2,000 consequence. Brand 5. ReadyLift. This brand targets the buyer who does not want a full lift. They want the front to sit level with the rear. Truck manufacturers deliver most vehicles with a slight front rake, and millions of buyers want to correct it. ReadyLift has sold into that demand at entry prices low enough that the downstream risk disappears from the purchase calculation until it shows up in a repair estimate. The failure mode is strut tower stress fracture and upper control arm bind. ReadyLift spacer-style leveling kits raise the front by inserting a spacer between the strut and the strut tower mount, increasing the effective strut length without modifying the upper control arm geometry. That is the entire problem. When you add strut length without adjusting the control arm, the upper ball joint operates at an angle beyond its design specification. 18 to 30 months in that condition produces accelerated ball joint wear, binding at full steering lock, and in documented cases, stress cracking in the strut tower itself, where the extended strut contacts the tower at an angle the tower was never designed to accept. The dealer tells you the damage is from an aftermarket modification. Technically accurate. What the dealer does not say is that the modification was an engineered product sold at retail specifically for your truck. ReadyLift is owned by Dorman Products, a publicly traded company built on cost-efficient mass production of OEM replacement components. That model produces excellent replacement alternators. Applied to a suspension geometry modification requiring precision engineering, it produces a product that solves the visual problem and ignores the structural one. NHTSA Inquiry PE 23012 examined strut tower structural concerns on Ford F-150 applications using spacer-style leveling kits with ReadyLift specifically cited. NHTSA complaint volume 280 plus entries across 2020 through 2024, the highest in this category. Ford's published position states spacer-style leveling kits may void the factory warranty on steering and suspension components. That language is not prominent on ReadyLift's packaging. Translation, the $200 kit fixed the visual problem. The geometry problem it created cost $2,000 at the dealership 18 months later, and the service advisor said it was your fault. Both things are simultaneously true. The brand knew about the second one. A ReadyLift spacer is a shim behind a door hinge. It fixes the symptom, transfers the stress, and the stress always finds somewhere more expensive to land. We get comments every week from people who had exactly this happen and were told by the dealer it was their fault. If that is your story, drop it in the comments. You are not alone. Keep watching. Brand 5 creates a geometry problem it does not disclose. Brand 6 has structural components that crack because the welds were never deep enough to do the job they were rated for. Item 6. Zone Offroad. When the weld is not a weld, Brand 6. Zone Offroad. Sold through online retailers and chain stores at price points that communicate value. A failure mode that is not about spring rates or damper fade, it is about structural components that crack under normal driving because the manufacturing process was not adequate for the load rated on the box. The failure mode is differential drop bracket cracking. On independent front suspension trucks above a certain lift height, a differential drop bracket repositions the front differential to restore correct drive shaft angles. This is a structural component under continuous load. Manufacturing quality here is not a preference, it is a safety variable. Zone differential drop brackets have cracked at the weld points within 12 to 24 months of installation, under normal driving within the rated lift range. The cause is weld penetration depth. A weld that does not penetrate deeply enough into the parent material is not a structural joint. It is a cosmetic join that fails as a stress riser under repeated loading. Zone operates as a budget label within the Suspension Max portfolio. It does not publish independent third-party test data on structural components. Its structural hardware warranty runs 12 months, half what most premium competitors offer. That duration is a manufacturer communicating its own confidence in the product's service life. Metallurgical examination. of failed zone differential drop brackets in a 2022 case study found weld penetration averaging 55% of the required depth per AWSD 1.1 structural welding standards. Required 80 to 100%, zone 55. At that level, the weld fails under loads well below the stated capacity. NHTSA 130 plus entries. Most common, bracket failure and loss of vehicle control. Translation, the bracket cracked. Not from abuse, because the weld was never deep enough to be structural. That is a manufacturing failure that shipped inside the box. A chain where every third link is at half thickness. It holds right up until the load the rating promised it would handle actually arrives. Brand 6 is a structural failure from a portfolio manufacturer. Brand 7 is the opposite problem, one of the most recognized names in the aftermarket, coasting on a reputation its current product no longer earns. Item 7. Rancho, a legacy name. Running on fumes, Brand 7, Rancho. Founded in 1956, 60-plus years of aftermarket history. Premium shelf placement, premium pricing. A flagship adjustable shock, the RS 9000 XL, that has not received meaningful engineering updates since the mid-2000s. Sold to buyers paying a premium the current product no longer justifies. The failure mode is RS 9000 XL damper bypass and rated output deviation. An adjustable shock's entire value proposition is the ability to deliver measurably different damping force at different adjustment settings matched to the published specification. A shock that cannot deliver rated output at maximum adjustment is not an adjustable shock. It is a shock with a dial. Independent dyno testing published in 2023 documented RS 9000 XL force output at maximum adjustment running 18 to 25% below specification across the velocity range relevant to highway towing. The same. Testing found inconsistent force curves between units from the same production run. Two shocks from the same box behaving differently from each other. Two dampers on the same axle doing different amounts of work. The right side and the left side of your truck are not being controlled by the same suspension. Rancho sits inside the Tenneco portfolio, which also owns Monroe, a direct retail competitor. Tenneco filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2022 and emerged under new ownership in 2023. Engineering investment is the first budget to compress during restructuring and the last to recover. Rancho's product development over the past 5 years reflects that pattern. NHTSA 200 plus entries. Most common, excessive body roll during towing and damper noise. Translation, you paid premium pricing for a 60-year brand. The adjustment range does not hit rated output. The units are inconsistent with each other. The trailer sway you noticed is not a coincidence. It is two dampers on the same axle doing different jobs. The RS 9000 XL is the greatest hits album a band releases when they stop writing new music. The reputation was earned. The current product is collecting royalties on it. Brand 7 is a legacy product in decline. Brand 8 is the most sophisticated deception on this list, a spring that reports its rated performance at a data point you will almost never actually reach. Item 8. Beltech, the spring rate. You will never reach. Brand 8. Beltech, specializing in lowering and sport suspension. And here is the thing. Beltech's fraud is the most technically sophisticated on this list. It does not rely on inferior metallurgy or weak welds. It relies on a carefully defensible reading of the word rated, accurate at one specific point on the spring's performance curve, irrelevant at every point you actually operate the vehicle. The failure mode is progressive spring collapse and dynamic load. Rating misrepresentation. Progressive rate springs are legitimate engineering. The rate increases as the spring compresses. Softer response on light inputs, increasing resistance approaching full travel. The fraud is in which point on that curve Beltech reports as the spring rate on the spec sheet. Beltech reports spring rate at or near maximum compression, the point the spring reaches only during severe impacts. In the operating range, the portion of travel used during every mile of normal driving. The effective spring rate averages 22% below the advertised specification. The rated number is technically achievable. You need to hit something hard enough to bottom the suspension to get there. Under every other condition, you paid for a spring that is running 22% softer than you purchased. Beltech is owned by National Spring, which also owns Hotchkiss Sport Suspension and McGaughy's. Multi-brand portfolio shared manufacturing different, retail identities at different price points. A Beltech spring and a McGaughy's spring from the same production run can appear as competing products on the same shelf. SAEJ 1698 testing on Beltech Sport. Lowering springs in 2023 found effective spring rate in the operating range, averaging 22% below stated specification. Rated performance only approaches accuracy at near full compression. NHTSA, 160 plus entries. Top 3, excessive body roll, bottoming under mild loads, premature coil bind. Translation: the spring rate on the box is the number the spring reaches when you bottom the suspension on a severe impact. Every other mile, highway cruising, loaded bed, trailer behind you, you have a suspension 22% softer than the label. The progressive rate technology is real. The reporting takes full advantage of what that technology permits a manufacturer to claim. A Beltech progressive spring rated at its maximum is like a chef's knife, rated for its hardest possible test material. Technically accurate, irrelevant to how you actually use it. 8 brands, 8 versions of the same fundamental fraud. Now here is what you do about it. Here is what this market actually looks like. Load ratings are self-certified. SAG 1698 compliance is voluntary. Private label brands share manufacturing with their supposed competitors. Legacy names coast on reputations built by engineers who no longer set the specifications. The buyer absorbs the cost in SAG, cracked brackets, strut tower damage, and warranty claims denied. The era of honest load ratings is not over. It never applied to the brands on this list. It applies to the brands that publish their data, because a brand willing to submit their products to independent verification is a brand confident those products will pass. Here is the short list. Bilstein B6 or B8. Damper force data published for every application. SAG 1698 compliance documented. Force curves independently verified within 5% of stated specification. If you're buying shocks for a truck that does real work, this is the floor. Moog Problem Solver series for bushings. Durometer ratings published and verified. 90A to 95A on heavy-duty applications. Material certifications available on request. For springs, IBAC Pro Truck. Spring rates independently verified. SAG 1698 compliance on the product page. Spring rate consistency within 2% across production lots, meaning the springs in your kit are actually matched. 4 steps. Use all 4 before you hand over your card. 1. Demand SAG 1698 certification or independent dyno data. If the brand cannot produce it in 24 hours, the number on the box is marketing. Move on. 2. Cross-reference OEM part numbers. If an aftermarket component maps to an OEM equivalent supplier, the specification is verifiable. 3. Check the NHTSA complaint database at nhtsa.gov before any purchase. Complaint volume and failure language are the most honest product review that exists, written after the failure, not before the purchase. 4. Verify bushing durometer. 90A minimum for heavy-duty applications. Anything below 85A under load is a maintenance interval with a heavy-duty sticker on it. Do not let them blow out your suspension and blame the road. Subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me in the comments, which brand are you going to ditch first?